Hey guys, welcome back to Real Talk with J&J. This is Jasmine Purnell.
And this is Josh Purnell. And today we're bringing you Finances Part 2.
So we are super excited with this one. We had 2 points that we went over in Finances Part 1, which is good credit and budgeting. And the second one that we're going to do in Finances Part 2, wealth creation and tithing and giving. And honestly, this is the most fun part for us is what we're going to get to talk about.
Yes, I would say that the other 2 points are kind of like the vegetables of the meal. You know, they're things that you need and you need to make sure that you're consistent about because it helps create a healthy life. And so now this is the main course. This is where it does get really exciting. It is where you're able to use your creativity. It's where you're able to use...
it's our Wagyu steak.
Yeah. It's where you're able to find what you like, how you can create wealth. But then there's the awesome opportunity that we have to first tithe and give back God what is his, but then to give to others. It's better to give than to receive. And when you are in a position where you are a giver, you will notice that things in life, that your perspective starts to shift. You start to have a different attitude towards money. And we kind of want to share with you guys what we've learned in those
personal
areas. For sure.
What we've been through and what we're going through right currently.
Yeah.
And point number 1 is wealth creation. And this is where it gets super fun because you can always be creative of how you want to make money. And there's just so many different avenues and different things that you can do to make money. And let's just dive deep into this.
Yeah. So your financial future is going to be the sum of the decisions that you make today.
Right now. Good or bad.
And it's not just today, over the next few years. So over all of your life, really, are you making good decisions? When it comes to wealth creation, a lot of times people think, there's only one way to make money. I need to go get a full-time job.
9 to 5 job.
And that's the only way I can create wealth. That is a great way to create wealth, right? We do need that because that is a steady source of income. But if we are smart, if we do budget and we do save ourselves a surplus, right? So we pay all our bills. We pay for all the food that we need, all the gas that we need, for all of our entertainment. And let's say, for instance, we have $1,000 left a month. I like using 1,000. It's an easy round number. Now, what do I do with that? I've tithed, I've given, I've paid all my bills. I have $1,000. Do I just go and blow it on fun things? Or do I take a portion of that or all of it and start putting it into other, what we call side hustles or other ways to create wealth?
Joshua, here's another question that most people, because I've had this question. Okay, so we have a savings account, right? Why wouldn't you just put that $1,000 in the savings account?
Okay, and this is my personal opinion. So, if you don't agree with this, that's whatever. Most actually, I don't know that any savings account, maybe there are, they don't give you any interest on your money. So you will put money like right now.
Or just like 8 cents a month.
Yeah, like something very minimal, like 0.001% that you're earning in interest.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people like their 401k, right? Which is money that you put in every month. But then when you bring up an index fund, they're like, oh, I don't want to risk it on the market. I'm like, well, that's what your 401k is doing at the end of the day. It's diversifying your portfolio within the market. And so whenever we save money, we typically will save it through some type of investment. And we do diversify our portfolio, which is a totally different topic. We'd have to have a whole podcast just on that. But it is really important that you don't, just buy risky assets or things that you have high return potential. Sometimes you need to buy bonds. Sometimes you need to buy things that might have a lower return threshold, but it's still better than the 0.001% that you'd be getting from your savings account. And it's also how liquid do you want your cash to be? Again, there's so many facets to that, but essentially, one thing that we do is we take a portion of our income every month and we put it into different types of investments. We put it into different types of index funds and that are basically tracking the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ or something like that. And over time, the economy grows and it will continue to grow. And, we always are very dutiful about making sure we know what those factors are, but knowing when to pull cash out, knowing when there's a real estate investment or something like that, which is something that we just started getting into, real estate investing.
So here's another question. I'm in high school, right? High school or college student. I have $200 to $300 every month that I can put in a savings account. When you're talking about putting in an index fund, putting all these things, what are the steps to do it for a high school student or a college student? Because I honestly was in those shoes of when he started talking about these things to me, I was just mind blown of like, I could have done this. So how can these students apply it?
Okay, so it looks like we are talking about index funds. So okay, I will be full disclosure here. I don't know if you can do it if you're younger than 18. Maybe you can. You can look up the rules on that, and maybe I'll if you shoot me an email, I can look it up for you. But I do know once you're 18 that you can start an index fund, and how it typically will work is you'll need to find a broker. So you'll need to find a investment brokerage firm that will essentially invest the money and buy the assets on your behalf. And unless of course you're like a licensed investor or something like that, which 95% of us or 99% of us aren't. So what you do is you go find a Fidelity, or you go find like a TD Ameritrade or something like that, and you'll open up an account with them. A lot of them have funds that are very low fees, i.e. if you invest $10,000 in a particular year, you'd only get charged like $25 for them to move all that cash for you, which is kind of a great deal. But essentially then you can go there and you can either have them manage it fully. You can be like, I'm just going to give you the money, which that's more of the 401k model, where essentially you just put it in there, you pick your investment risk profile and they'll invest it for you. Or you can, buy and sell certain stocks, whether it's individual stocks or like Jazz is mentioning, an index fund. And why would you buy an index fund? Just a quick, my personal view on this, again, this is all my personal view, is, a lot of times index funds over a long period of time, where they're going to track between 7 and 12% growth, which is going to be typically much higher than inflation. So over time, if you take $1,000 right now and it grows and it compounds, right? So if you earn 11% per year, well, even if you only invested that initial $1,000, an 11% return would yield you what? $110. Now, if you earn another 10% on that 111, then you'd have $1,200 and so on and so forth over time without any initial or any additional investment. And so if you are putting additional capital in and you are earning that return over time, time value of money is such a powerful thing. The difference between investing 20 years versus 30 years, the amount of wealth that you'll create, it's almost double that you would create if you use a 30-year time period, because of all that compound interest, all that money that you're not actually doing much for except putting the initial capital commitment there. And so if you are able to start younger and you are able to put just a little bit aside, you don't need to be starting this with hundreds of thousands of dollars. A lot of times people think I need a whole bunch of money to invest. There are a lot of funds that sometimes don't even have a minimum. You could literally go in there with $50 and start buying. And so if you could do that a month, again, you could buy into just a mutual fund and let someone manage your money for you. But again, starting and doing something is better than doing nothing. Yeah. And so obviously when you're researching this, you want to compare different brokerage firms. Like I always will go up and I'll research different brokerage firms. I'll look at what their fee rates are. I'll look at what their typical returns have been for the last 20 years.
So a cool thing that we have in our life is we have a lot of friends and we have a lot of family who are very creative in this wealth creation realm of like, I have a friend who started a snow cone shop she's doing very well. And like, it started off with a dream. It started off with something she envisioned of having to make money, and she went out to go do it. My little sister started a purpose clothing brand, and it started with a vision. It started something with what she wanted to do, something she had a passion on, and she just started it. My brother-in-law's like, come on.
Yeah, they started their own businesses right out of high school, and they learned, and they failed, but they've also succeeded. And it really comes down to developing a good skill set, being useful. And being able to answer a problem or to meet a need. It's how you create wealth. You find where the opportunity is, you develop a good skill set, and then you go out and just rubber needs to meet the road. You actually have to flesh it out. You can't just talk about, I love to create money and throw off lofty ideas without actually ever putting action in. And a lot of times people don't see results in like 20 minutes. So they're like, this doesn't work. If you want to create wealth, you need to, of course, make a good plan. Yes. Take your time, do your research, but then you need to be consistent over time, fleshing it out. When you do make a mistake, instead of quitting, you learn from that mistake and you correct, and then you continue to go over time.
Something that I loved that John Maxwell said, that he gave an analogy of someone having to cut down a tree. That they went to cut down a tree. What matters? What do you need? What tools do you need to cut down that tree? If you try to hit it with a bat, that's not going to work. But if you get the right tools of like getting an axe and go cut down that tree, that it can work. But the important thing is to be consistent. If you go every day to go, like maybe an hour a day to go try to cut down that tree, it's going to work. But if you go an hour to go to that one tree, and then the next day you go to another tree for an hour, and then the next day you go to another one, you are not going to cut down your first tree that you wanted to do.
But also, if you don't go to that tree every day, if you go there one time and try to cut it down in 1 hour, that tree is probably not going to fall.
It's not going to fall.
But if you go every single day for over a year, that tree is going to be on the ground, and you're going to,
however long it takes.
Yeah, however long it takes, you are going to see the job come through. That obstacle is going to fall. You're going to learn. And sometimes you do start off with a bat, and that's where you need to have the wherewithal to wait, this isn't working. Let me reevaluate. There's so many educational resources. There's other people who have done what you want to do that you should get in contact with.
Yeah.
One of my brothers literally got in a group, and he's like, here's what I want to do. I'm going to get in a group with people that do this. And that's what helped yield him good results, because he learned his skill set. He also learned where he needed to grow, but then he was around people that were already doing it. So he learned from them and was able to find an opportunity. I think so many times we try to do it on our own, but it is good to get surrounded by community and find out people that have been there before.
No, and a lot of times, like with what I just gave the analogy of the tree, a lot of times we want to start something and we start it, but we don't see results. So we're like, oh, we're going to go to a different avenue. And we don't see results. Oh, we're going to go to a different avenue. And we never see the result. But if we just stayed consistent with that first thing that we had, over time, we eventually are going to get there. And we're eventually going to cut down that tree. And that's kind of hard too with creatives. I know a lot of times with us, like we have so many good ideas, or I like to think they're good ideas, but we just have so many ideas, and we're like, okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. And we're like, sometimes we just have to slow down and say, okay, what do we think is the best idea for us to start right now? And what are we most passionate about? What can we do with our time that we have now? What's going to be more effective with the time that we have now? And we just list off these things, and we're like, okay, this is the one that we want to do. One, this podcast. And this is where we are right now. We make sure we spend at least an hour a week or even more to make sure that we're writing the content, we're making sure that we are recording this content, and we're making sure that we get it off to get edited and everything else.
So another thing I think is so important is that we need to understand that maybe what we're doing isn't what our dream job is going to be forever. When it comes to wealth creation, maybe the 9 to 5 that you have right now is just a stepping stone that you need for a little bit of time. But if you are committed to what you really love to do, if you do find out where your niche is and you start developing a skill there, and you start a business and you learn through trial and error, you're not reckless in your pursuits. You're not just investing 100% of your money. Well, maybe that is you. Maybe that works out. I've seen that before too. But you're using wisdom. You're asking the right questions. You're taking time. And I'll kind of tell you the story, even for this house. So we bought a house in October of 2021. We got to build our first house. Super awesome experience. Beautiful home. We loved it. And 6 months later, or 7 months, I don't know how long it's been.
7 months.
We were in a position where we noticed that the market in our area had really seen some appreciation. And we were like, there's a lot of equity in our house. There's a lot of equity in our house very quickly. And at this point, we still had some student debts. We still had, car loans, some debts that we had on our, portfolio still that we had been paying on time and stuff like that, go back to credit score. But there are still balances on there that we would love to get rid of. And we also really wanted to get into the rental property real estate business.
We wanted to start wealth creation. We wanted to start walking what we're talking about.
So we just talked to a realtor, and we talked to an appraiser, and we said, how much is this house worth? And they gave us the estimate, and it was a fair bit over what we owed on the house. And so we kind of set in ourselves, we said, hey, if our house makes this amount of money, we're going to sell it. And we prayed about it. We asked God for guidance. We really thought about this for a few weeks, and then we decided to pull the trigger. And then when we met with the appraiser and the realtor, we found out like the number that we said we thought our house was worth, that's the minimum we would accept. That happened to be the number that it was. And then when the sales process started, we started this on a Friday, and we accepted an offer on a Monday. So this took a weekend. And we had an offer that came in like $60,000 over that. And so we're like, wow. So now we're going to be in a position where we have this awesome home that we have, which how do we get this home? It started with working consistently, working hard, building good credit, taking that time. We were able to get this home, but that value that we gained,
budgeting,
we then were able to cash in on and say, you know what, we're going to sell this house. We're going to get the cash. We're going to pay off our debt. And then we're going to have additional cash left over to start that real estate investment property.
And it was really cool because like a lot of young couples or young people are not able to be in this position. And honestly, it was kind of nerve wracking to even think about doing this because a lot of people will say, well, Jasmine and Josh, you are crazy. You just built your dream home. Like you just had it for 7 months. Like you got to pick out everything. This house market is crazy. Why are you doing this now? This doesn't make sense. And honestly, it doesn't make sense, but it does make sense. It doesn't make sense in a sense of why we do this now, but thinking long-term and thinking what we want to do with wealth creation, thinking of the things that we can do with this money, it just makes perfect sense. And it just gives a sense of peace of knowing like this was the blessing that God gave us for this time in this moment. And now we get to use it as something else. And now we get to have rental properties. Now we get to do these things.
And people may ask, well, what are you going to do in the meantime? And we told them we're going to rent. And they're like, well, why would you rent? You're not gaining any equity. I'm like, well, in order for me to get the equity out of this house, if I were to buy another house, that's something that we wanted, you'd be losing
in this market that's still hot.
You'd be paying extra for a property. Even if we downsized and we got a property that was only worth $200K. Well, let's say for instance, it's worth $200K, but we're going to be paying $260, $270 for that. Well, renting for a year is going to be less than that number. So
let's be real, it's probably not even worth the $200K than what it is now.
Yeah. Yeah. But now what we can do though, is we can cash on this house, go rent. And then that still gives us excess capital to get an investment property, to maybe find a diamond in the rough, start putting money into that, flipping it, maybe rent it out. So now we have income coming in from that property, whereas love this home and everything that it is, but there's no income coming in from this house right now. If we can find a house and we are able to get all of our debt paid off and have an incoming a cash flowing property, that is a great way for wealth creation. And it takes thinking outside of the box a little bit. It takes doing something that's a little bit out of the norm, but it puts us in a position that if we are smart and we continue to apply these principles in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be able to have even more of the dream home that we wanted. We're going to be able to have, different assets under our name that we're able to utilize. It's going to be something super cool. So
family and friends, if you are watching now and we haven't told you, we sold our house and we're moving to Dallas.
Hopefully, if you're watching this is a few months after. So hopefully we told you. Sorry if we didn't. You probably figured it out when you didn't. You noticed you weren't here. So one thing I will say, and the final thing on wealth creation here is, don't chase get rich quick schemes.
Pyramid schemes. We all fall into them.
Pyramid schemes. Anything that says you can get rich without any work. When you hear those two things, it's immediate red flag. It takes hard work, even if you want to build a business. There are some things that you can use creatively, but it still takes the work to do the education, to learn how to do it. It takes time to actually put it into the field. It takes some of your money sometimes to buy the courses or to know exactly where to put your money. So a lot of times if you say, oh, you can literally work 1 hour a day and make $1 million, I'd be really skeptical of that. And you know what? And this is where I think of a Bible verse, and it's in Proverbs 13, and it says, wealth from get rich quick schemes, it quickly disappears. Because what does it say? If you don't have a work ethic and you only expect money to come quickly, even if you were to necessarily get that money, but you haven't taken time to budget it, you don't know what you're going to do with your next thing, you're probably going to go spend it on things that aren't actually going to create additional wealth. And then you're back to square one.
Yeah. And Joshua said that too, of making $1 million in a minute or whatever. If people are doing that, they probably put in the work years prior to that. The hard work, that sweat that no one sees, but they get to see what they're making now and they think it just comes out of nowhere. No, don't have that thinking. Know that they did put in the hard work. Yeah, they did all their studies. They did all the statistics looking at statistics and all these different things.
They've also probably done a lot of trial and error. They probably learned things through failing a couple of times, or maybe they didn't always be successful. They found their niche. They found exactly where they could create wealth. So basically the cusp of this point is there's awesome ways to create wealth. It's going to take hard work, but you need to start thinking outside the box. Use your creativity and find ways to maximize your wealth. And then that transitions us. What do you do once you get this wealth? Once you're budgeted and you have extra cash flows? And this honestly could have been the first point. I think this is the most important thing about money.
This is my favorite thing.
Yeah.
That we get to talk about.
So our next point is we're going to talk about tithing and giving. And I think this is actually probably the most important thing. And it could have been the first point that we talked about. But one thing Pastor Robert Morris says, he has a book called The Blessed Life. And he gives this perspective on money where sometimes we think that, okay, I make $100 and I guess I'll give God $10. Tithing is 10%, right? So it's, I have to give God $10 of my money. But the perspective that we should have is that everything that we have, 100% of it comes from God. So if I were to give you $100 and I said to you, hey, I'm going to give you $100. All I need you to do is give $10 to Jasmine every month. I'm going to give you $100. You just need to give $10 to Jasmine. Well, if you don't give $10 to Jasmine and I'm giving you everything, then you're stealing from me because I'm entrusting you with that $100 and I'm saying you can keep $90 of it. All I want you to do is give $10 to Jasmine. That's the perspective that we need to have. God is asking us to give back to him and to assign the money, what is already his. He's the one that's given it to us.
So a simple definition of what a tithe is 10% of whatever you earn. So more specifically, it is the first 10% of your income. Now, a lot of times people think the perspective of like, oh, I'm giving God 10% of what I earn, rather than, oh, this is what God gave me. I get to give him 10% back. It's a huge mind switch.
And kind of to the point where Jazz said it's the first 10%. A lot of times we think I have bills, I have these things, so I'm going to pay off all those things, and whatever I have left, I will give to God. And again, regardless of what your reasoning is, you're still not giving God what is his. He again, 100% is his, and he's asking you to give that first 10%. And I think one of the biggest things that it did in my heart when I started tithing was realizing that everything I do have comes from God. And that I'm giving back to him what is his, but it also helped me be disciplined to say, do I actually rely on myself or do I rely on God? Am I only relying on myself, or am I letting God lead my life? And if I'm not able to, if I'm trying to pay all my bills and I say, oh, you know what, God, I have to take care of everything before I can give to you, I don't really trust that he's going to take care of me.
And the reason why we feel like it's important to share with you, just because this has been a big impact in our lives, in our marriage. Before we even married, we started this, but like as we come in together as one, really standing by this, like this house is a testimony of God's faithfulness and what he has done in our life. And like Joshua said, that when he realized this is God's money that I'm doing. It's nothing that I did. It's nothing that I earned, but it was the ability for me to get this from God.
Yeah. And I think that when we tithe, like it says, it stops the attack of the enemy. God, there is that protection that we have because we're giving God what is his. But then the next step is to go even a little bit further and is to start giving. Not just tithing. Tithing is what is required, but giving is what we decide to do out of the abundance of our hearts. And if you are a person, that wants to see joy come into your life, if you want to see a continual blessings, like start giving, even if it's just a little bit. Maybe you only make $50 a month. Well, maybe you just give $1. Maybe you just give a little bit over and above your tithe. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to give to somebody else. And like Jasmine was saying, in our life, we've seen so many doors open that we couldn't have just opened ourselves. Yes, we worked hard. Yes, we budgeted. Yes, we did the things that we were supposed to do. But even within that, things that beyond our imagination, beyond our own ability have opened for us. And it's been so cool to see the consistency and the faithfulness of God in those areas.
And I want to do a disclaimer too of like, just because we are tithing, because we are doing these things, doesn't mean we stop working. Doesn't mean that we stop doing things physically. Like, no, we are still working. We're still working hard. We're doing these things God has called us to do, but he meets us where we're at. Because I know that can get confusing if some people are like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make God do everything, and not and just sit on my couch and do nothing.
But God wants to have partnership with us.
Yes, exactly. It's a partnership. It's a co-laboring thing that we do together.
And I feel like God does it because he doesn't want us to be stingy. You know, I think when you're a stingy person, I feel like you limit the amount of wealth that you're able to create, because instead of being able to give, and like it says, it's more blessed to give than receive, you hold on to things. And a lot of times God wants to give you blessing, but if he knows that it's going to get stuck in your hands, he's not going to give it to you. He's going to give it to somebody else that's going to make sure that those resources are allocated to people that need it. A lot of times people will think, oh, money is evil. Well, the love of money is the root of all evil. And I think tithing helps us understand not to just love money, but it helps us to love giving. It helps us to love partnering with God. It helps us love having his perspective and his blessing. And it helps us understand that, you know, it's not just about money. God is on an even higher level than money. God can provide from us more than any of these other things can. And money is a tool that he uses oftentimes. But again, if we are more focused on the tool than the tool creator, we can get in a spot where we're super stingy about things, where we're not able to be to live our life to the fullest. And I think God wants us to be givers. And a lot of times people think giving, they're like, oh, I don't just want to give to people that are going to waste my money. And I don't think that's the intent. I think that when we are a giver, we want to look at people that actually need help, that are going to be good stewards as well. But it's not really for us to decide what people are going to do. If we are partnering with God, it's about, hey, I'm going to partner with an organization. I'm going to partner with someone who's going to use this money for good. And I'm not going to necessarily always worry about controlling the end result. I'm just going to be obedient.
And I know as a young believer, hearing that, it's more blessed to be a giver than to receive. And I know hearing that, I would always be like, what do you mean? I love to receive gifts. I love getting things from people. And then until I got really mature and understanding of like a revelation of what that truly means, it is really a blessing to be able to give to people. And some people think like, to be able to be a giver, you have to have millions of dollars, or you have to be super rich, or you have to do all these things to get nice things for other people. But that's not true. That's what the enemy wants you to think, so you cannot be a giver. And you can start with something small, but it's like purchasing a meal for someone, but like not even purchasing, like giving time, or just doing small things. Small things what matters to people, and just the thought people love. So I will say, like, having a little sister, someone that's 10 years younger than me, has been a true blessing, because it gave me the ability to take her to do things and see that joy that she has of like me stopping my day and to take her out to go do something, or to like something simple, like go getting ice cream, go getting snow cones. It's just something that is awesome that you can do, and that qualifies you as being a giver.
Mm-hmm. And I think giving is where we open our lives up to the blessing. I know we mentioned that before, but it represents a strategic shift in how we think about money, because we understand that at the end of the day, there are people in a position that's going to be maybe worse than where we're at. There's people who need help, and they need someone who can help them. And sometimes we think, oh, I can't give all of it, but giving some is better than nothing. I think this mindset that we can fall into is, well, I don't have enough to pay off their entire bill, so I'm not going to pay any of it. It's like, well, maybe you have a little bit and you can help out a little bit. Maybe you can help with time. Maybe you can just show up and volunteer somewhere. Giving, and then if you do have the money, if you're able to support somebody or support an organization, there's so many amazing organizations out there that are doing the work of the ministry, that are helping those less fortunate, that are helping those in hard places, and they all have opportunities where you can help and give to that mission. And so there's no excuse, not even if it's $5 a month, maybe that's all you have to give, but give something, because then you understand that I am giving something for a bigger purpose. And it's not just about me trying to hoard all of the wealth. It's about me generating wealth so that I can help others, so that I can have an impact on others in a positive way.
And I think what like really stands out to me with this topic of tithing and giving, what it helped me personally was to be a better steward of money, and to look at money like differently. Like money doesn't have a tie over my life anymore. Like I know when I was younger, like the goal was to be rich. The goal was to have tons of money and tons of physical things, and like houses, cars, and all these things. And yes, that's nice, and nothing's wrong with that. But to me, that's not the goal anymore. That's not like something that I need. And that's what we just talked about with wealth creation, of like how we're getting rid of this house of like back then that would have been hard for me to say no. Like, hey, I have this nice house. I have these things. Like, I'm not going to get rid of it for something that might not even work out. And I feel like what God did in my heart was be able to show me like, hey, these are nice things. And this is like, these are nice things. And this is what I'm going to get funnel through you. But just know that this is not yours. This is something that I gave for you to steward. Like this house, this is something that he blessed us with, that we were able to steward. We were able to host students. We were able to have worship nights. We were able to do all these things. But right now, like, this is an opportunity for us to give it back, to give it away, and to do something else. And that's what really, really was big in my heart of like, hey, I don't have a tie anymore with money. Like, you can't bribe me with money anymore. Like, yes, we need money, and money is important to do things, to funnel things, but it's not a God over my life.
That's good. And, you know, I think kind of in addition to the story that Jazz said, in full disclosure here, from my perspective, I didn't always give. I didn't always tithe or give. I always wanted to. And I would say, oh, one day I will have enough money and I won't have to worry about it anymore. I'll be able to give then. When I was in college, you know, I would justify, oh, I'm broke, so I don't have that much money to give. So I need to pay for these other things. Otherwise, they're not going to get paid for. And what I was doing in that situation, I was making myself the God over my life. And I was saying money is the only thing that's going to solve my problems, when instead of being obedient to what God had for me. Well, fast forward a few years, then I did start giving, but I didn't always give the first. I would give after I paid all my bills, after I made sure I was good. And usually I had enough to tithe. Usually I had enough to give 10%, but I wasn't giving it first. It wasn't my first priority. And Jasmine and I actually had this conversation when we were engaged, and she's like,
tough conversations
coming at you soon. But it was something that convicted me, because she was like, hey, you're not giving first. Why? And if we're going to go into a marriage together, if we're going to go do this, then we need to make sure that we're on the same page about how and when we're going to tithe. And so at first I was kind of like, no, I tithe. It's the same thing. Like, I give 10%. That's all that matters. And I was like, no, I need to make sure I set up the first thing that leaves my bank account when I receive money is the tithe, and it's God's. And that strategic shift that happened for me, probably early 2019, I started seeing so much change in our life. We just saw blessings that the reason I believe this so strongly is because things have happened in my life that weren't happening before. And it's not just attributable to hard work, because I've always worked hard my entire life. I've always been someone that's worked multiple jobs or done things. And I feel like I was always laboring so much more. But when I started to have this strategic shift, I started tithing and we started giving. And we made that a commitment first. And literally God has increased that 80%, because we would tithe 10% and give 10%. And that 80% that we had left has tripled in only a few years. Yeah. And it's gotten us in a position where, and again, favor from in every avenue of our life. And it starts with just having the right perspective on money.
And it's something that I really love that Pastor Morris said in the Blessed Life book. And honestly, guys, if you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it.
Go check it out.
Not only is it good practical steps and everything, but it's just so easy to read because it's so interesting and you just
Very
want
helpful.
to know more and more and more of it. But something that Pastor Robert said is like, it's going to be easier for you to live off the blessed 90% that you have, rather than the cursed 100%. And that really kind of shook me too, because I was just like, once you tithe, that's like you're blessing the rest of your income that you have. And shoot, I want my income blessed. Jesus, I'm going to give you that 10% first.
So kind of to wrap up both of these podcasts, what did we talk about in part one of this series? We talked about credit score and budgeting. And like I said at the beginning of this, it's kind of like the vegetables of this, where it's really important that you understand what your credit score is. You understand how it's going to impact you in the future. You understand how to manage it. And a lot of that can be learned through budgeting correctly, learning how to balance your income versus your expenses to help you achieve your goals over time. Make sure that when you're budgeting, though, that you don't just say, you think about wealth creation. Now, wealth creation and budgeting are two different things. The answer to your problem isn't just to create more money. It's to learn how to budget initially. And when you do create more money, all that's going to happen is you're going to have more to budget and you're going to have more to focus on. And that helps you grow over time. But what's the most important thing you can budget? Make sure before you do anything that you give your first 10% to God, that you also take time to budget in giving to others. Make sure that you're someone that gives out of yourself. It's so important that we have that mindset that it's better to give than to receive, because when our perspective on money is correct, when we work hard, when we manage our money, when we're good stewards, and when we're able to give and not be stingy, the blessing that you would see on your life is so much bigger than anything you can imagine.
Something that Joyce Meyer said that just came to my mind right now is like, if you don't respect money, don't expect money.
Yeah.
And that could be going in line with budgeting.
Yeah. Wasting your money on things that you shouldn't be wasting it on. If you only have like if you have the wrong respect for money, if you think that money is going to solve all your problems, if you don't understand that money is just a tool that God can use, you're always going to have your life out of balance. And so what we hope through these last 2 episodes that you've learned is that there is a way to manage your money effectively, that God's blessing is real, and that you need to make sure that you're doing the steps to get that in your life. But then also use your creativity, use the gifts that God's given you. Find projects that inspire you and commit to those things and be consistent about it over time. Don't let failure distract you. Just keep moving forward, keep learning, keep growing, find others that have been where you want to be and keep moving that direction. And we're so glad that you guys have listened to this.
We'll see you soon.